Good afternoon. Welcome to the Committee of the Policy Management Committee meeting on January 26th. For the record, I would like to start off by wishing everybody a Happy New Year. I forgot this morning that this is the first time we're meeting in the new year, and I want to welcome our new Policy Committee meeting member, Ms. Brenda Wolf. I'll start off with introductions, but we are also, I understand, making an amendment to the agenda and the order in which we're going to proceed. So I would like to first move that we move the agenda as edited.
Second.
All in favor?
The chair can't make the motion, right?
Oh,
Right,
can I not?
right.
Yeah, right. Okay. I thought when it was at a committee, it didn't, since it automatically comes from the chair, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're right.
Right, okay. So we're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you take your vote?
We did.
Okay.
I thought it was unanimous, but yes. Okay. So with that done, let's start with our introductions, and we can start with Ms. Evans.
Good afternoon, everyone. Shebra Evans.
Good afternoon, Arvin Kim.
Good afternoon, Brenda Wolf.
And I guess staff, we will do that as we go along. All right. So I just wanted to double check with my colleagues if they have any questions or concerns or comments on the informational summaries. No? Then let's just dive right in. We've got a full agenda today. And we're going to start with a policy BBB, our ethics policy.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Leslie Turner Percival, Legal Director in the Office of General Counsel, and Happy New Year to all of you. Our presentation of proposed updates to policy BBB ethics will be composed of two parts: technical updates required by law, followed by revisions proposed by the ethics panel. Joining us for this presentation today are Mrs. Robin Seabrook, Director of Governance, Policy, and Community Relations for the Board of Education, and staff liaison to the board's ethics panel. She has been instrumental in this update. And Mr. Daniel Fisher. Mr. Fisher is currently serving his second term on the board ethics panel, and on behalf of the panel, he will walk the committee through the panel's additional proposed revisions. Mr. Fisher is joining us virtually. I will start with the technical updates. The Maryland General Assembly enacted new legislation during its 2021 legislative session. This legislation made multiple modifications to the state ethics law. The changes include new conflict of interest provisions and additional disclosures that boards of education must incorporate into their ethics policies. Both the Office of General Counsel and the Board of Education's ethics panel have reviewed these technical provisions. Specifically, those required changes are as follows. The term quasi-governmental entity is now defined, and I'll refer you to page 7, line 167. Defines quasi-governmental entity, meaning an entity that is created by state statute that performs a public function and that is supported in whole or in part by the state but is managed privately. There is also now a language prohibiting the acceptance of gifts from associations engaged in representing counties or municipal or corporations. This primarily refers to gifts given by or on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties or the Maryland Municipal League. And I refer you to page 15, line 399, and pages 33 to 34, lines 915 through 918. Next, we were required to add language prohibiting the disclosure of confidential information by former officials or employees. And that change is on page 17, lines 468 through 472, under disclosure of confidential information. Additionally, our policy must also contain language prohibiting retaliation against individuals for reporting ethics violations or participating in an ethics investigation. That's referred on page 18, lines 476 through 479. There were also several changes to the financial disclosure provisions. As you recall, certain MCPS officials, board members, and candidates are required to file a financial disclosure annually and no later than April 30th. The board office is in the process of revising the financial disclosure forms to comply with these new legal requirements. I'm going to walk through them in turn. The first revision, beginning on page 23, to the financial disclosure provisions is that relationships with the University of Maryland Medical System, state or local government, or a quasi-governmental entity must now be disclosed. However, as you will see on page 20, line 534, the amount of consideration received from UMMS, state or governmental entities, and quasi-governmental entities is prohibited from being disclosed to the public. Typically, financial disclosure statements are public information. Under this new provision, the board office will redact any information regarding consideration received from these entities before releasing the statement to the public. Okay, secondly, to the extent that an individual is required to disclose the name of a business on a financial disclosure statement, the statement must now include the name that a business trades as or does business under. That's on page 23, line 628, and pages 37 through 38, line 1018. Third, the financial disclosure statement must also include gifts received from an association engaged in only representing counties or municipal corporations. Again, like the revision that was made to the acceptance of gifts provision, this primarily refers to gifts given by or on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties or the Maryland Municipal League. And fourth, to the extent that an individual must disclose an interest held in a business entity on his or her financial disclosure, the new regulations now define the disclosure of those interests in accordance with the percentage of the business held. That changes on page 39, line 1053. As mentioned earlier, the ethics panel is recommending a few additional changes to the policy. I will turn it over to Mr. Fisher to present the panel's proposed revisions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for providing me with the opportunity to join the Policy Management Committee today to present proposed revisions to Policy BBB on behalf of the Ethics Panel. The panel and the panel's advisory council held an open meeting on October 26, 2022, to review the legally required revisions that the Office of General Counsel just presented. In addition to this, the panel took the opportunity to suggest minor updates to the policy language for ease of use, grammar, or consistency. We also focused on two areas where we thought substantive revisions were needed. The first is on page 15 of the policy at line 413, and it covers an exception from the general prohibition of receiving gifts involving unsolicited gifts. The panel received many questions about teacher gifts, and particularly class gifts. There has been confusion about whether and what type of gifts teachers could accept from students and their families. For instance, if a teacher has a class of 30 students and each one gave the teacher a $10 Starbucks gift card for the holidays, could she accept all 30? Under the previous language, this was not clear. The panel is proposing new language that clearly permits school officials to accept unsolicited gifts that do not exceed $20 per individual giver during a calendar year, and that school officials may accept gifts of nominal value, for instance, like a mug, magnet, pencil. That is for nominal gifts. The second area where the panel is proposing revisions is in the lobbying section on page 5 at line 133. The current policy uses in-person activities to define lobbying, such as inviting an official to a meal, a concert, or buying them a gift. Panel thought that this reference was outdated. Given recent events and advancement in technology, we know that more business is being done virtually. So we removed the reference to physical presence here in the policy so that now it refers to any communications with the intent to influence. Current language also limits the type of compensation given to a school official by a lobbyist to food, entertainment, and other gifts. Panel also proposes removal of this narrow specific language and proposes that any gifts or series of gifts that meet the $100 threshold given in furtherance of the intent to influence would meet the definition. These are the two major substantive areas proposed by the ethics policy, and thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you for your feedback on that. We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us as well.
Thank you.
I didn't know if you wanted to jump in further or if you,
Just to ask if the committee.
No,
I'm sorry?
He thought you were talking to him.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was,
to me,
no, that's okay. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you, Ms. Mandrowski. I just wanted to ask if the committee approves moving this forward to the full board for tentative action at the February 7th, 2023 meeting.
So, yeah, I should have mentioned to my colleagues before, with this particular policy, we have the choice of whether or not we want to send it to the full board. We don't have any choice on the legal aspects of it. They will be accepted. And then also this draft policy needs to be sent to the State Ethics Commission as part of the process going forward. So once we decide to move it forward to the full board, they will send a copy of it to the State Ethics Commission. I have a couple of things that I wanted to ask about, but I will check with my colleagues first and see if they have anything. Okay. So one of the things that I had is starting on page 5, essentially. It lists, the $100 or more is spent during a calendar year. The county level says $500, and as we're trying to bring this into alignment with both the state and everything else, I was thinking we should perhaps do alignment with the county as well.
And this is with respect to lobbying, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. This is actually not something that the panel discussed at the meeting, so it's not something that had been decided upon or raised. However, that said, I understand that if it's the board's will to raise it to $500 because it thinks that is appropriate, that can be done.
Okay. Colleagues, what do you think?
Okay, as I understand it, Montgomery County allows $500.
Correct.
And the model policy, if I remember correctly, didn't include an amount, right?
Correct.
So I have no problem in bringing it into alignment with Montgomery County at $500.
You do? Okay, can we go ahead and do that?
I'm sorry, could you clarify where exactly that is?
Sure. Page 5. I mean, it's actually a couple places, but we can start with page 5, line 138. So, right, like it is for the county council.
So the 100 is, that's not a new number in the draft that's.
No, this is the old policy. It's the old policy language.
That's the current.
That's the current state law, right, on it? Is it the
Well, it's
current
not
state?
state law. It's
the current policy.
The ethics code does have, it says at least $100 in the state ethics law. The model policy that we were given has a blank to allow jurisdictions to insert the amount.
Right. That's why I felt that we could bring it into alignment with the county itself.
Yep. I did as well. So, okay, if there's no objections to that, then we'll go ahead and make those changes where
Yeah.
were indicated. Thank
We'll make
you.
that change.
The only other question that I had was about the state ethics model does not incorporate the words, the per calendar year aspect. So when you're looking at the changing the language, I am very supportive of the adding per individual, but my question is, to, again, stay in alignment, would it be better to just remove the per calendar year aspect?
Again, we understand that neither the ethics law nor the ethics model policy references the calendar year, and that, again, deleting reference to calendar year from this policy was not a topic discussed at the ethics panel meeting. However, again, if the board decides to make this change, the only consideration that we have is that we may need to consider changing other references to calendar year in the policy, because I do believe that reference is used in multiple locations.
Okay. Well, this is one I don't feel strongly about. I was just more trying to get some feedback on it. Ms. Wolf?
I actually support the calendar year.
Okay.
I don't know, it seems to me that it mostly applies to our teachers. And if you use calendar years, usually a teacher gets a little something from their student at Christmas
Yes.
or the holiday
So
and at the end of the school year,
I agree
which
with
are
that.
in different calendar years. So
I
I don't
would-
have a problem with that, and I could support that. Thank you.
No, I'm good with that, too. When I first started looking at it, I was thinking fiscal year, your school year, so that's part of why I was thinking we should remove it. But calendar year, to Ms. Wolf's, yeah, it actually helps, so I would prefer to leave it in, so scratch that suggestion. And then I don't think that I had anything else. Unfortunately, my one notebook got moved, but I think that was pretty much all I had, right? Okay. So now up to my colleagues. Are we comfortable with sending a copy of this to as amended to the State Ethics Commission and forwarding it on to the full board?
Just so I understand the process, do we vote on it at the full board before it goes to the ethics, goes to the state for approval?
We were thinking about sending it, I mean, it's up to you all, but we were thinking about sending it to the State Ethics Commission in draft form at the same time you bring it for tentative action to the full board. Or we can wait until immediately following that full board meeting to make sure that there are no other changes proposed, and then sending it to the state ethics. We want, the idea is that we want to, in case the state ethics comes back with something, we don't want the board to take final action and then send it to the state, and the state comes back with some changes too. So we want to leave some room for us to address any changes that come from the state.
So then when would we be taking final action? I'm just trying to get the process, because.
So at our
process is
February 7th meeting, the draft would come to the full board to take tentative action, which would then move it to public comment, and we
Okay.
could then also send it to the state, and then if it comes back, after having heard from the public as well as the state, we could make amendments if needed.
My only process question again is then, if it moves to the public before it comes back from the state, and the state comes back with substantial changes, then we'd have to send it out again to the public, wouldn't we?
Yes.
So wouldn't we be better off waiting until?
Yes, I think we would be.
So you would rather wait then until after the comments are gathered and
Just till,
it comes back to policy committee one more time?
No, what I'm saying is, shouldn't we wait until the state weighs in before we
and
send
then-
it out for public comment?
So that's why we
So
were
that
gonna
they are
send
not, in case they have any substantial changes,
That's right.
which is closely aligned with the model policy. I don't think that they will. I'm just asking what the process should be here.
that's why we were going to send it out at the same time as moving it forward to the full board.
Yeah, but you're sending it out for public comment. That's the part that concerns me. Before, I don't know.
Unless if we have substantial changes, we send it out for another round.
Correct.
Yeah, and you
If-
could do that. I don't have a problem with that. I just wanted to know what the process was going to be.
Let me see if I can clarify some dates. If at February 7th, tentative action, you move it forward to the State Commission and a public comment period simultaneously, that allows for the committee to come back at their March 16th meeting and review the public comments and review the State Commission and make a decision and then move to final action this spring. If we move, we have one remaining policy management committee after that in May, and I would, May 25th, I think? 16th. Okay. So we would have to lay out the timing to get from policy management committee on March 16th to a full board meeting to send it out again and get a public comment period completed, minimum of 21 days, and back by May 16th to get it done in this fiscal year.
Right. And I think that because it's not guaranteed that we would have to send it back out for public comment, I feel like we would only do that if there were really substantial comments and changes made. So I'm comfortable with that as long as you all are, with that timeline, I mean. Because potentially, we wouldn't have to worry about that extra 22 days before bringing it back to the full board.
If I could just clarify, so after February 7th, depending on the tentative
Yes.
action decision, we would do both
Yes.
public comment and State Commission?
Yes.
And then at your March 16th meeting, you would review?
Correct.
Okay.
And then ideally move it to the full board, assuming there aren't any changes. Is that okay? Everyone comfortable with that?
Yep. Barbara has a question.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I think that was on from before.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, all in favor of moving this to the full board and the state for tentative action? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan, very much for all your time
Thank
and work
you
on
all.
this. Thank the committee for us, please.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
That's great.
I certainly will, and thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right, so then, moving right along, we are going to go to policy IJA, school counseling. Is that correct? No.
ABC.
ABC, sorry. I'm like, where? Got too many copies of it here now. I know, but I thought I was looking at the new one. Oh, here we go. Yep, I'm sorry. No, still don't have it. We're doing ABC? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So, policy ABC, parental involvement. This policy is currently called parent and family involvement. And one of the things that we will be considering today is updating the title to family school partnerships. We will also hear from staff about a number of other upgrades to this policy that are probably long overdue since we've not reviewed or amended this policy for some time. Once we get through the presentation, we can determine whether or not to send this to the full board again for tentative action on February 7th. And with that, I will turn it to General Counsel.
Thank you. Joining us at the table are Francis Frost, Office of Wellbeing, Learning, and Achievement, and Edwin Hernandez, Equity Initiatives. Today, as you stated, we are bringing a first draft of Policy ABC, Parent and Family Involvement, that not only changes the title to reflect an emphasis on family school partnerships beyond just parent involvement, but also incorporates findings from the anti-racist audit and updates to national standards for family school partnerships. And I'll turn it over to Francis.
Good morning. know this by now.
Good afternoon. You have in front of you a comparison table for policy ABA and ABC. We're bringing both of those to you today. And just to clarify the difference between the two policies so we understand what we're talking about, you have a comparison table. So we have policy ABA, which I think we're going to get to next, which is around community engagement. And you'll notice that policy ABA focuses on decisions made by you all as the Board of Education on district-wide decisions such as policy development and other major initiatives across the district. Policy ABC, which we're getting ready to get into, emphasizes the decisions made by parents and guardians and the family's role on behalf of their own students, such as those about students' individual academic programs, and it emphasizes families as partners, stakeholders, and advocates in more individual and school-based decisions. So policy ABC, as the Family School Partnerships or Parent and Family Involvement, as it now is titled, fulfills requirements from Every School Succeeds Act, federal law of Title I, Title II, and Title III, which have parent engagement policy and the requirement that school districts have meaningful consultation with families as they make their decisions. So ESSA uplifts family involvement as a component that's critical to student success. And as you all know, it's a major funding source for our school districts. And this federal act ensures that equitable resources for education are available to our students that are most impacted by conditions such as poverty and learning English as a second language, and therefore uplifts family involvement in the decisions related to those children's education. So as we looked at this policy, we reviewed the expectations of ESSA, and then also when we look into the regulations and guidance and professional development, that reflection in what ESSA's expectations are will also be part of that review. The other part of the upgrade is that the previous version or the current version of policy ABC is based on the National PTA, National Standards for Family School Partnerships, and National PTA has over the last year undergone a revision of those standards, leaving the 6 standards in place, just as we have with the policy ABC. But what it does is it incorporates recent research in family engagement and looks at family engagement through more of an equity lens and cultural inclusiveness when we look at family engagement. So we've taken those updates and approached the revisions to this policy or the proposed revisions in the same manner. So we'll have Edvin Hernandez talk a little bit about the role of parents as advocates, which is supported by this policy.
Thank you, Francis. Good afternoon, members of the board of the Policy Review Committee. I wanted to provide how this policy is also grounded in what we already have as a framework from the Maryland State Department of Education and also federal law. And then on top of that, we know through the meetings that we've had in the community with families, we know that families want to advocate for their children, for what is in their best interest academically as well. And I want to share a couple quotes from just last week. I had a meeting with Identity, and right now we're having some community conversations regarding the anti-racist system audit. And so I want to share with you just what families are sharing as we're having these conversations with them. So one quote is, "It is in the interest of both us parents and the school personnel that they address the communication problems and the situations that we want to bring forward, whether or not we speak English. The Latino community is very large now, and there are even some schools where the majority of us are Latinos." So families understand this. And then this is just having one community group out of many conversations we've had. So our hope And what we want with this policy is to make sure that we're looking through a critical lens, examine this policy and identify, develop alternatives and upgrades to the practices that may exclude identifiable groups of families from meaningful family engagement. Also, examples of key ways of family engage in decisions about their students and their students' schools is through the development of the SIP, the School Improvement Plan, and meaningful activities in the community, parent-teacher conferences as well. And I would like to say about that I hope with this policy we can, talking about being critical, that we're more purposeful in how we're engaging our families in those processes, especially the School Improvement Plan. And finally, in our meetings like the one that I mentioned regarding the anti-racist system audit, we've also heard about the challenges, but also innovative practices at schools who have been innovators in creating meaningful family-school partnership with families who are representative of the various cultural and linguistic backgrounds of their students. And you know what that innovation is? Is the human connections when we take the time to listen, to understand our families. In the conversations I've had this past week with families, it's amazing how a family was sharing how one admin school secretary that was at Fox Chapel Elementary School, she said, I don't understand why they took her out of the school and put her in central office. I don't know what she did wrong. And what she really was telling about Ms. Martinez, our secretary that is now in this building, is that she would take the time to listen, to understand. When a parent would come in with a bullying and they wanted to do a report, she would take the time to help them fill the forms. It was just everything that she did to make them feel visible. And that is what we need to do and make sure that these policies are helping us do that in the community. And I also want to point out one more thing, if I may, and that is I want to bring forward our anti-racist system audit report, because there in there we have a domain 5, that talks about community relations and engagement, and I want to give you observation 5.2, just what it says, because it connects to this policy. And it says, observation 5.2, some staff perceive that the current system for communication and family engagement produces barriers for families of color and report not knowing how to implement family involvement strategies in the ABC Parent and Family Involvement District policy. This right here, what we're doing right now, is what not only makes me feel happy or excited about the work that we're doing, but also hopeful. Because there were times when we started doing this that I had my doubts. But to be part of this process where we're talking about this policy and the work that we're going to put into it, it makes me feel that we're going to do something about it. So now I'll pass it on back to Francis.
Thank you, Edvin. As Edvin so skillfully and passionately talked about the purpose and the why of family engagement and how this policy will uplift that family engagement across the district, one of the important additions that is included in this policy is the how. We talk about acknowledging that technical assistance and professional learning for staff is needed in order to communicate and work with families in ways that we aspire to in this policy. And as Edvin mentioned, the anti-racist audit points out that need, both by staff and parents, that need for additional professional development. This same challenge is reflected in research that's been done by National PTA recently over the last 6 months around family engagement and the capacity for school districts to engage with families. So we want to make sure that our staff know how to effectively implement family engagement per the policy. It's not just a policy on paper, but one that staff are comfortable and ready to implement. And we want to make sure that families, particularly families of color, understand what is in the policy and how it is there to encourage family engagement. So, the learning for effective and cultural inclusive engagement should include communications, creating welcoming environments, including diverse parents and school improvements and PTAs. Again, all that you heard in the anti-racist audit, and you've probably also heard just in your walking around the community. So the professional learning we are encouraging should be for all school-based staff. We generally rely on such staff as the PCCs for that family engagement work, but this policy confirms that this work is truly the work of all of our staff, especially our teachers and our school administrators who interact with our students and families every day. So we want to make sure that they have the skills to effectively engage with our families. The concepts and strategies for family engagement are just not mere add-on tasks and specific activities, but it's the how of how they talk to families, how they engage families in their everyday work, checking in on families, having parent-teacher conferences and things like that. So we want to make sure that our staff are ready and prepared and confident in their professional learning on how to implement the policy. Thank you, Leslie.
Okay, I'd like to invite Chris Cram from the Office of Communications to join us at the table to provide a little bit more information on interpretation and translation and the efforts underway to examine communication practices in this area.
It's important to sit on the right side. Good afternoon, everybody. Ms. Maria Campos, our supervisor for the Language Assistance Services Unit, is ill today, so she couldn't be here. I hope to step in and answer your questions related to LASU. We do, the unit that does our language translation and interpretation is in the Department of Communication. It's been in existence since 2006. And at that time, law determined that the languages that we served, the initial 5, were Chinese, French, Korean, Spanish, and Vietnamese. In 2017, a new analysis of the languages spoken in MCPS was done, and because of requests from the community to add Amharic as the 6th language, in 2020, another request to examine our languages was done, and we added Portuguese at that time. Based on the latest report in Synergy, for your information, of languages with 2% or more either determined by language indicated by families of preference at home or ESOL services, the top 5 are Spanish, Amharic, French, Chinese, and Portuguese. But again, the languages we serve also include Korean and Vietnamese. Thank you very much. So we have 7 translators, 1 each for one of those languages, and we have 100 temporary part-time individuals who work as interpreters by request throughout the system. We currently have done so far this fiscal year over 6,700 pages of translation in Spanish, and then much less in Amharic, French, Portuguese, Mandarin, and Korean. In Amharic, a little more than 1,100. In French, a little more than 1,000. The number of requests for interpretation services since July 1, the same period of time, is nearing 9,500, 9,429 requests for interpretation services, and that does not include what is done in Language Line.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Sally to walk us through the policy.
Okay, so where to find what my esteemed colleagues have been talking about. So as you'll see, line 9, we've changed the title, Just to reiterate, the first purpose of this rewrite is to emphasize that this is regarding decisions made by parents and families, or parents and guardians or families as participating in the life of the school. We remain in alignment with the national standards for family-school partnerships and comply with federal requirements that we have such a policy. I just want to emphasize the issue, page 2, line 38. The families are children's first teachers, and as they come to school, families and schools have a shared goal of nurturing healthy, resilient, and competent youngsters. There are 3 main position statements beginning on page 2. The first is line 46. The board is committed to a strength-based approach to viewing families. And line 51, that the board expects all employees to promote and demonstrate a commitment to high expectations for achievement for all students in partnership with their families. The third, line 65, is really where we get into the 6 principles from the national standards. They were here before, we are updating, but just to reiterate, the first principle being to welcome all families. The second principle on page 4, to communicate effectively. And just to note, beginning line 103, as the anti-racist audit clearly demonstrated, and what my colleagues heard clearly in that work, was that we need to be committed to the achievement of all students so that families know the critical education benchmarks, course sequences, timelines, and application processes required for their students to access rigorous instruction and educational opportunities, such as magnet, gifted and talented, language immersion, and dual enrollment programs, courses leading to college and career readiness, including professional certification, scholarships, and other leadership development opportunities. We want to affirm, beginning on line 118, the issue of language, which is why we asked Mr. Cram to come and speak to the existing practices. We did get a comment related to language translation and in relation to another policy. And I wanted to emphasize that KBA, Policy on Public Information, is where the board states its requirement that there be accessible information, the accessibility of information. So that is already in KBA, which was recently revised. And so we're contemplating the possibility of revising the reg to provide some more procedural language about how this might be done. So that's just a footnote there. I will come back to that idea in a minute. The third standard, line 125, supporting student success. And this relates to our federal requirements to build families' capacity. We are also, adding that we need to build staff members' capacities as well. And you'll see on the next page the reference to our federal requirements. And then, as Mr. Hernandez noted, line 145, normative engagement practices shall be critically examined to identify and develop alternatives to traditional practices that may exclude identifiable groups from meaningful family engagement. Standard 4, the bottom of page 6, speak up for every child. We want to emphasize advocating for fair treatment and equitable access and supports for all students. Standard 5, share power. And just to note that the interplay between this policy and the next one we're going to talk about of parents and guardians who are representative of the school community in school improvement planning and innovation processes. Page 8, the 6th standard, to collaborate with the community. And then on the bottom of page 8, reiterating the desired goal to effectively collaborate with all families towards the shared goal of healthy, resilient, and competent young adults. Now, I did want to raise a suggestion, and I apologize for the late addition. It was something we were working out in response to some constituent conversations over the last 2 days, so I do apologize for that. We are suggesting that on page 9, line 222 and 223, where it has the implementation strategies, where the superintendent of schools will, and then the list follows. And at 222, you see the superintendent will, off of that stem, develop and implement regulations and procedures in support of this policy. And we would suggest adding some additional language that says, including but not limited to, the definition of documents that are vital to families' access to their students' educational program in alignment with state and federal law, and the provision of language interpretation services. This gives us the chance in regulation to flesh out a little bit more those documents that are vital and must be translated into all languages that are interpreted and translated in the district.
I like that.
Okay, let me move on. 229 to speak
Can you
to.
repeat that, please?
Sure.
Just a little louder, baby.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So building off the STEM at 222, develop and implement regulations and procedures to support this policy, including but not limited to definition of documents that are vital to families' access to the student's education program in alignment with federal and state law. And second, the provision of language interpretation services.
I couldn't hear you.
The provision of language interpretation services.
You okay with that?
I don't have a problem with it. I just couldn't hear you well. But I do have a question. Is it, when they develop the policy, could we include something in here to ensure that there's evaluation of this policy so that we know that whatever we're trying to accomplish is actually being accomplished?
Yes.
We can, and we can, I can point you where we were thinking that concept, which is page 12, line 299, that the superintendent will develop goals, indicators, and metrics for effective and inclusive family engagement, and monitor the milestones and data points annually, and identify barriers to participation.
It just seems so far removed from the part that requires them to develop a policy. And I just want to be sure that it's highlighted. So, I mean, I don't know whether you can move that up, move this back, or make it so that they can at least be read in conjunction in some sort of way.
Sure. So move those lines about 299 to 306.
Number 1. Yeah.
I will leave it to you to propose how that should go, but just so that they don't seem that you're talking about developing it here and then you're talking about the requirements for it 4 pages later, you know?
Okay, understood. Shall I go on?
Please.
All right.
Yes.
Page 9, line 229, as Ms. Frost noted, designate staff responsible for providing coordination, technical assistance, and other support necessary to build the capacity of MCPS staff. 237, 236, consult and collaborate as appropriate with parents, guardians, and families to develop professional learning for staff. And then going on, provide on 245 models for relevant and effective family outreach programs. Line 251, well-publicized structures for two-way communication. 268, develop templates and tools for school use. And then the note about the language at 299, which we will move forward. Mrs. Smandrowski, I will turn it back to you.
Okay, I'm going to say thank you for going through this with us and open it up to my colleagues. Ms. Evans?
Yeah. I was just going to say, this is a really good policy. Thank you for all the work. And I don't know how we could have timed it any more perfectly. We ended our anti-racist audit. We started this policy, and then the National PTA came out with their 6 standards, so everything is aligning perfectly. And I always appreciate Mr. Hernandez. You always come and give real-life stories just so we can, have a glimpse into the minds and hearts of our family. So I really do appreciate that. And Ms. Frost, thank you for the work you've done here at MCPS and with National PTA as well to bring that forward to be included in our policy. So just wanted to note that for the record.
Before, I'm going to see with the other, my colleagues, but I did have one question in terms of the new title. I have different things listed different places. I've got family school partnerships, school involvement, school engagement, I've seen. So, but school partnerships, you're going to leave the word family. Okay. I was like, but just reading school partnerships doesn't seem to really. Okay. I'm like, they were in bold and the other is not. So, all right, just wanted to clarify that. Ms. Wolf? No? No? Okay. Well then, as long as everybody's comfortable with it, we will vote to move this on to the full board for tentative action. All in favor? Great. Done. Unanimous. Okay. Now let's see if I can get this right. Next up, we're going to go with policy ABA. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Community. So our review of this policy was prompted by a request from the late Pat O'Neill in this committee because of a desire to examine public participation opportunities for students, parents, and guardians, and community members so that their ideas, interests, and concerns are considered and valued in board and MCPS decision-making processes. Again, after we hear from you all, the panel's recommended revisions, the legal requirements, we have no choice. We will obviously adapt. And then we can determine if we want to send the rest of it to the full board.
Thank you.
Oh, we also have to send this one to the state. Is that correct?
No.
No? Okay. Got it.
Okay. Turning now to policy ABA, we're returning from an extended public comment period with proposed revisions to the draft policy in response to public comments. You may recall that the full board took tentative action on March 24th, 2022 to send the draft out for public comment. The public comment period was open from March 30th, 2022 through December 22nd. The public comment period was left open to allow for additional comments after the completion of the anti-racist audit. At the conclusion of your deliberation today, the next step in the process would be for the committee to move the recommended draft to the full board for final action, which is tentatively scheduled for February 7th. Rejoining us at the table are our colleagues from the ABC presentation. Turn it over to Francis.
All right. Now, our next one, policy ABA. Welcome back. In your packets, you have stakeholder engagement summary that shows over a year of engagement efforts to develop this policy and consult with our community about engagement. Also in your packet is a summary of the 20 comments received through the public comment portal and through emails to your office. So in preparing these revisions, we remind you of the conversations we engage with in our community. This has been a long process of getting community engagement. So we did hold small targeted focus groups. They were held in English, Spanish, Chinese, Amharic, and Vietnamese. And they were small, but we intentionally made them small as focus groups so we could have more detailed conversations. And these groups raised the following issues for us to consider in this community engagement policy. They mentioned including equity, diversity, and inclusion goals and metrics, requiring intentional, differentiated, culturally appropriate approaches, having understandable policy language and translated policies. We also met with representatives from the Black and Brown Coalition to understand some of their suggestions that they had submitted for more inclusive engagement, and they similarly reflect the points from our focus groups. In our various conversations with stakeholders, it was apparent that we should incorporate the following considerations as well for better community engagement: more far-reaching and multilingual communication to all of our communities, and building the capacity of parents to engage more fully in engagement. So the key concepts that we have addressed in the policy and will address in the accompanying regulation are as follows: apply an equity lens to address the impact on all students, intentionally include students in our engagement efforts, use best practice tools such as the MCPS Culturally Responsive Engagement Planning and Implementation Tool and evidence of equity, and other relevant industry resources to be used by staff leading family engagement activities and training and providing professional development for our staff. MCPS may need to employ a variety of methods appropriate to the goals of their engagement activities. MCPS should also provide the appropriate resources, professional development, and staff to design, facilitate, and conduct the family engagement or community engagement activities, and that there will be a report back to the board with a summary of engagement efforts, as Ms. Wolf had mentioned around the evaluation, and provide support to local school administrators as needed in their engagement efforts. We have made recommendations to update policy ABA, including changing the title of the policy to community engagement, and these updates reflect consideration for more culturally inclusive and actively engaging practices to support and inform the board decisions in the best interests of the students of Montgomery County Public Schools. Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mrs. Frost. So I do want to note that my line numbers and page numbers refer to the draft that is labeled January 26th.
Good to know. Yes. Hold on. Give me a minute, please.
I will. We have had more conversations with our stakeholders over the last week, and that required some more thinking and updating.
I do. It reads updated at the corner. In your folder. That one. Maybe? No?
Both of mine say 119.
No, this one says 126 in the folder.
126 in the folder, right?
Sorry, we're just going to need a minute to make sure
I understand, and
Just a little.
I apologize.
It's okay.
It seemed very important to get some more feedback into this one.
Okay. Oh, wait. Yes, I was going to say, actually, Stephanie has a. Oh, there you go. All right. Oh.
Yours back?
Nope.
Thank you. She had an extra one.
Yep.
Because I have 119.
Yeah, I did too, but I found it.
119 on the copy I had.
Everybody good now?
Yeah.
Everybody's great.
I think so. Thank you.
Okay, just a note about formatting. When we go out for public comment and then come back, we try to highlight in gray the things that we have done in response to public comment.
Yeah.
I realize it gets a little challenging to read. Bolds and strike over strikes, text. Okay, so some of these were just making the wording better, but I do want to draw your attention to, again, the purpose of ABA is to get engagement regarding board decisions.
Can I just ask you a question? It would be helpful to me because clearly I had the wrong version. It's probably being new to the committee. If you could just point out the difference between, if you know, the 119 version and the 126 version.
I will.
Thank you.
I will. One thing that is different is on line 20, the words that impact children. This policy is intended to be an umbrella for community engagement purposes and some concepts. There are other policies and regulations that have more specific operational processes that may be about facilities or such. And in response to some comments, I just wanted to kind of make it clear that when we're talking about some of the ways we define community members as let me get there. Anyway, that is an update. Let me move on to, let's move on to page
3. The changes here are to rearrange the wording to make it a little clearer. One of the comments we got was that some members of the public were not clear what marginalization meant. Marginalization is defined in the glossary of the anti-racist audit, but the main concept is exclusion. So I've tried to rework this to get that better so that it's clearer that the board recognizes the complexity of effective, inclusive, and equitable engagement practices and the need for guidelines and structures for stakeholders and staff. That part is the same idea as what was in there before. What's a little bit different is clear expectation, guidelines, and resources are needed so that engagement efforts do not exclude stakeholders, and that's building back on what marginalization means. Down at 75, research-based models shall inform the processes. We got some feedback about the difficulty individuals had accessing the particular document we referenced, and so we removed the particular reference but reworked the language to demonstrate that that research informed the development of this policy, but we are not wholesale adopting that other document. But the key purposes of engagement remain down on page 4. We added language, and this is different from the 119 draft, at line 86. Certain operational processes may require additional engagement protocols, and this policy is not intended to supersede those processes, including but not limited to policy FAA, Educational Facilities Planning, and regulation FAA-RA, Educational Facilities Planning, which has more about adjacent neighbors, all the language that is in there about what they are required to do under code and under the various review processes required for permitting. Again, line 98 to 100, in taking out the specific reference to a specific document, we just do want to emphasize that the goals are to clarify when we're inviting community stakeholders to participate in engagement, they should know what they're being asked to do. And if it's to inform that they're just going to receive information, that should be clear. If we are consulting, if we are collaborating, we are involving, it should be clear what they are expected to do. Now, line 129, I'm suggesting some language, and even this is from a conversation this morning with a stakeholder. So you will see at line 129, it currently reads that community members, and I'm going to skip down to 129, may include MCPS parents, et cetera, et cetera. We would like to suggest, in response to constituent feedback, these will include, comma, as appropriate, comma, and then the list moves on. All right? Let me move on. And just to note, in the list of members, we include Montgomery County residents, and then business, civic associations, non-governmental associations. Let's see. Let me move over to page 7, bottom of page 7. We want to acknowledge the interplay between this policy and ABC, but also the interplay between this and our statements about non-discrimination, as well as KBA about accessibility of language of information. Let me move on. Bottom of page 9. Again, we were rethinking the references to specific documents because we wanted to leave room for this specific document possibly to be upgraded in response to best practices, possibly renamed, but we wanted to keep the key concepts, which are from line 244 down to line 259. The key questions that organizers of engagement need to be asking themselves. The other update we have added, I do want to draw out, and this refers back to our conversation on policy ABA. If you go to page 14, line 375, Redacted is the language about interpretation, services, translation, et cetera. We did not intend to mean that we were stopping that practice. We did want to emphasize earlier in the document that the board requires us to do this work in policy KBA, and we can develop this further. But we did receive some comments with concern that we were stopping our interpretation and translation services, which was never our intention. Quite the opposite, in fact. And let's see. Okay, and then page 16. Just to emphasize line 415 to 421, the need for there to be support for staff to do this well. So maintain a cross-office committee responsible for supporting culturally responsive communication and the various tools and guides they will need to do that well. And that concludes my comments. Mrs. Smendrowski?
Okay, so again, thank you very much for your work, and particularly for really reaching out to a multitude of different organizations and groups to get feedback and really taking seriously the comments from the public. We're very appreciative of that work that you all did. I will turn it over to my colleagues and let them start. Though it looks like we have no comments, it's perfect. Well, with that, we will move it forward. I'll take a vote, see if it's okay to move forward to the full board for tentative action. Final. Yes, final action. We're going to move to make final action. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. So great. This will go to the next board meeting. Oh my, moving right along. I like it. Okay, our item number 4 is our discussion of policy IJA, school counseling. Some may recall we started our conversation on this policy back in April of 2022 with a presentation on the framework for revisions. We also learned that the policy needed to be updated in order to acknowledge professional standards, clarify the scope of work for the different mental health professions, and ensure that the policy is legally compliant. So today we're going to take a look and review the draft policy and hear about the preliminary stakeholder feedback that we've gotten. And after reviewing it, we can determine whether this is ready to go to the full board for tentative action.
Thank you. So we're on to policy IJA, school counseling. Joining us at the table are Mrs. Shauna K. Duranby, Director, Office of Wellbeing, Learning and Achievement, and Ms. Michelle Palmer, Coordinator of Psychological Services. Since IJA, school counseling programs and services, was initially adopted in 2004, MCPS has strengthened its commitment to student well-being in ways that make a policy solely about school counseling incomplete. Instead, MCPS now takes a multidisciplinary approach to student social emotional well-being that includes school counselors, school psychologists, and in recent years, school social workers who are working in the schools, and additional professionals providing direct outreach into families' homes, such as pupil personnel workers, emergent multilingual learner therapeutic counselors, and parent community coordinators. In the years since this policy was adopted, board policies have no longer functioned as job descriptions. As such, the intention of this redraft of IJA is to articulate the board's commitment to a multimodal approach to student well-being and some key dimensions for what must be in place in order to achieve the desired outcome of students and families accessing, when needed, the appropriate support system when students experience concerns, worries, or crises that impact their well-being and success. Today, we're bringing a first draft of an umbrella policy for school counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, pupil personnel workers known as PPWs, emergent multilingual learner therapeutic counselors, that's a mouthful, known as ETCs, and parent community coordinators, PCCs. Joining us are supervisors and administrators responsible for these various social emotional health professions who will assist in presenting the efforts underway to coordinate these professions from the perspective of students and families. Turn it over to Shauna K.
Good afternoon. In our work with students and families, in board testimony, and in some of the preliminary feedback that we've gathered, we hear from students that they are generally concerned with interactions with peers and about stress. From some students, we hear about barriers to access private therapy. From the system-wide well-being survey taken by over 61,000 of our students, they report stress and anxiety, family concerns, and communication as highlighted areas of support needed. When we ask students about counseling, they ask for more access to one-on-one personal support in school. From the lens of our professionals, we're hearing the full picture of how their responsibilities for assessments, 504 plan case management, and other responsibilities limit their availability to provide the kinds of one-to-one personal attention that students want. Our professionals want to do this kind of one-to-one work with students. However, what you see in the preliminary feedback from staff is some of the challenges that they face in balancing the responsibilities of assessments, case management, provision, educational programming, and other duties assigned to them as a result of school's needs. One of our benefits of this policy is that it moves us closer to seeing across our various professions a multimodal approach to the kinds of education, prevention, intervention, case management, and crisis response services that our professionals provide. You may recall from our presentation to you in April, a graphic that showed the overlap of all of our professional spaces. We have included this in your materials. And moving forward, we will be improving on this communication to assist our families and our students in understanding how our professions work together, including the work of our direct outreach colleagues, our pupil personnel workers, our ETCs, and our parent community coordinators. Ms. Palmer is now going to talk a bit more about a school-level perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Duranby. Good afternoon. One of the benefits of this policy is how it calls us to look across our various helping professions to get a full look at staffing and the provision of services at each school. While there are some common needs, students with anxiety, families with food and housing insecurity, each school has unique needs, and the professionals assigned to them must analyze those needs and develop plans that suit each student, family, and school community. The student well-being team is the coordinated team at each school that supports this process. Each student well-being team is staffed by a counselor, a school psychologist, and a PPW. Schools with ETCs and PCCs will have these staff participate in their student well-being team meetings as well. While every school does not have a designated social worker, each student well-being team has access to one through central services. We believe that students and families should know the names of their counselors, school psychologists, and social workers who are regularly in their buildings. And they should have easy access to the names of the individuals who serve on each school's student well-being team. Ms. Davis will walk you through the policy in a minute. But you'll notice the implementation strategies we've put forward for ourselves to collect regular feedback on stakeholder access to programming and to provide professional learning to school staff other than well-being professionals so that they understand how to help students access services. We already have some of these processes in place. For example, the student well-being teams meet. They keep track of students whose needs are discussed, the follow-up needed to address those concerns, and a timeline for returning to discuss the effectiveness of any strategies or interventions put in place as a result of the follow-up. Additionally, we are also about to pilot a new data monitoring system through Synergy that will allow us to keep track of how students are responding to interventions that we've put in place for them. The system will allow us to follow an MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support framework for determining the level of support needed. I'd like to turn to Ms. Davis at this time to walk us through the policy draft.
Thank you. So I won't go through every page, but I do want to start with the first line, because it's important to realize our intent to make this an umbrella. And so just a few of the related entries point to some of the specific topics that are already addressed in regulation. For example, COARA is the regulation of procedures guiding behavior threat assessment. IGORA is the guidelines for incidents of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug abuse of students. IJARA is the school counseling regulation. IOHRA, for example, is the regulation regarding mental health referrals. And I will note that staff have noted a need for that to be updated. So that's on our work list. We'll get in there. Just to name a few. So I next want to draw your attention to the purpose, to affirm the board's commitment to the social, emotional, and mental health of students as essential components of school attendance, learning and achievement, and school completion, and then to set forward a framework for multimodal provision of programming and services. Beginning on lines 2 through 4, we're recommending 5 main position statements. Starting on page 2, line 37, that the board promotes effective coordination of the various professions so that families and students have an understanding of the function of our social, emotional, and mental health professionals. This is not an exhaustive list of their responsibilities. And while staff and students alike, as Mrs. Duranby said, want to maximize the amount of time with one-on-one, they have many other functions as well. Line 64, page 3, acknowledges that students and families may not turn to a professional first. And so they may have others in the building that they rely on and see as caring sources of support. And so we will talk a little bit later in the policy about the importance for those people as well as professional social, emotional health, mental health programming services providers to understand where to send them so that they are effectively linked up with what they need. Line 72 affirms the need for inclusive and culturally responsive communication. Line 81 affirms the need for students to have opportunities in person with professionals who can help them. And line 88 reiterates the importance of effective communication. The fourth principle is about that addresses the required certifications, confidentiality requirements, and consent requirements that our professionals are responsible for. So confidentiality and consent are significant concerns for students and families. They don't always have the same goal. Students generally want to be assured of complete confidentiality, and parents may have a different perspective. Our professionals have to toe this line daily, and they are guided by the national professional ethics of each discipline. And so we have included those here, and can communicate those to families. Line 120 acknowledges community partner agencies as key part of this umbrella, and they will be subject to clear contractual relationships that provide for the safety and confidentiality of students. Beginning
Where was that? Line 129? 120. I'm like, I don't, okay.
Okay. Beginning at the bottom of page.
Yeah.
Bottom page 4.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Councils and priorities.
Bottom page 4 and onto page 5 reiterates the desired outcome of all students will thrive and become healthy, resilient, self-confident, and successful young people, that they will be, top of page 5, engaged in school life and make good decisions that promote their own well-being and the well-being of others. Down to line 151, just to mention some of the required curricula that our professionals are required to deliver. They will implement the Maryland State Department of Education grade-specific and age-appropriate school counseling, social emotional learning, and health education curricula that assist students to gain the social emotional knowledge and skills appropriate to their level of development. 158, provide students and families with school-level access. Let's see. Line 164, as Ms. Palmer noted, collect regular feedback on stakeholder access. And line 168, help establish professional learning objectives and supporting resources for MCPS staff, contractors, and volunteers who regularly interact with students so that they can facilitate appropriate and timely connections with social, emotional, and mental health programming services when needed. 181 provides an opportunity for the board to review staffing and capacity. And that brings me to the end. And I will turn it back to you, Mrs. Mindrowski.
Okay, great. So before I open it up to my colleagues, I have a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. On page 4, you talk about the applicable professional standards that are established by, and then list organizations. I'm curious as to, okay, a couple things. I'm curious as to what those organizations say about ratios, and whether or not that's something that we should be including in the policy to help eliminate some of the inconsistency of ratio issues that we're finding from school to school. And I'm wondering if I guess, looking at the reviewing and reporting, I was thinking maybe it should go in there. I was trying to figure out where it should go, but I'm really, I guess, actually more asking my colleagues in terms of what their thoughts are. I was curious as to whether or not these organizations state anything in their policies about ratios, and if so, what the verbiage is, and whether or not we should incorporate it into our policy.
Can we take that question back?
100%.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You can look at it, give us some feedback, and bring it even to the final board if you want to, if it moves forward with everything else. Did you have something specifically about that?
Yeah, I think I would have some concern about putting actual ratios in a policy, because, as you know, we've actually had difficulty in hiring staff,
Yes.
and so we already know what's desirable by these different groups. So if you put it in the policy, it becomes almost absolute, and I just don't think that that's a good thing to do.
Well, that's part of why I wanted to bring it up, because in discussions with staff, that came across as well. And I mean, obviously, we can only do what we can do. But I was just more curious about what the other organizations say, because we just hear from people about it so often. Very well made. I think we have something about it in our regulations, though, correct? Maybe? Or like a guideline of some sort? I just want to make sure
I think it's incorporated. I know that in the facilities policy, we talk about, class sizes and so forth to meet space needs and so forth. But the reason I asked if we could come back to that was basically for the reason that Mrs. Wolf expanded upon. I think it would be helpful if we had a fuller understanding of what's represented by these organizations. I think the intent, which maybe we need to clarify, the intent of this language is that each of the associations has expectations for the manners in which the professionals engage with students, maintain confidentiality, those kinds of things. So I wanted us to have the opportunity to look at that more closely, precisely for the reasons that Mrs. Wolf, and that may cause us to refine the language here to be more specific about the standards, but we can bring all of that information back to you at a future time.
Okay, great. The next thing that I had was in reference to private students who get private counseling, I would like to propose an amendment to this policy, and basically at line 123, add a number 6. I worked with staff on, again, the language for this, but, and I realized that one of the words I have in here is redundant, so it needs to be changed, but MCPS will establish, or does whatever, that word probably needs to be changed, regulations that establishes MCPS students the ability to meet with private practitioners during the school day on school grounds in a manner that is consistent with privacy laws. Issue being that we've had students who would like to utilize an empty classroom or something to have a Zoom conference, a telehealth meeting, and have struggled with being able to do so. So I would like to incorporate some language that specifies that they don't need somebody sitting there watching them have their therapy meeting. They don't have to sneak off at lunchtime off campus or whatever. This is the goal I'm trying to achieve.
Can we invite Mr. Monteleone to come to the table?
So as board members consider that language, we'd like to ask him to provide some further information for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mondrowski and other members of the board on this committee. It's an honor to join you today. So I'm just here to provide some perspective on this issue. And I think it's clear that our principals absolutely want all of our students to get all of the mental health attention that they need. And I just want to provide some context to this. So when we have a student that is receiving private mental health care in our building from an outside provider, normally we have faced challenges with this. Currently, our current situation is we have a form, right, that was developed years ago with the intent of face-to-face, right, in-person therapy. And when that would occur, the principal had the discretion, right, to be able to approve that or not approve that. And so really, since the pandemic, right, this has evolved, and this form has been utilized, to my understanding, in ways for folks to be able to access telehealth services, mental health services in schools. And so what this requires of us is exactly that, right? So we in our schools normally are needing to provide a space for students to receive this, and that supervision. And as we look through the form itself, right, it does have a number of requirements that the parent and the mental health provider must provide, right, in terms of their licensure and their background check and fingerprinting and so on and so forth. Just from my personal perspective, when I served in the seat of a principal, when a private therapist would come in, they would go through the screening process like anybody else that would come into a building with their driver's license, and we could actually put a face, right, to the person that was coming in, to the person that was on the form, and then we are able to screen for safety and security reasons right there. Some of the issues that have been faced and some of the challenges that our principals have faced is, one is with the capacity issue, really, of just the space and logistics of where this is happening, and also that supervision, allocating staff, as you referenced, Ms. Mondrowski, to supervise or to oversee this. And the other piece that has been raised by some of our building leaders is that even with, say, that form filled out, we're not sure exactly who the student is communicating with, right, on the other side of that virtual device. So it really does present some capacity issues and some logistical issues and some staffing issues. And so I just wanted to provide some of that background. And while our principals absolutely want our students to have the mental health services that they need, I'm imagining under our current conditions how bringing that to scale in a consistent way that is consistent with our current policy and our current, the language in that form would present challenges. So I'm just presenting that for the board.
And I appreciate that, and we could, I mean, this language was basically like a rough draft, but part of why I referenced, consistent with privacy laws and things like that is, it had been mentioned to me about the staffing aspect of it. I don't see how that's even remotely relevant. A staff member should not be sitting in on a counseling session with a private provider that the parents have signed off on, agreed to. And, if there needs to be language, in my opinion, because I've heard we think there might need to be a staff member in case the provider says something that upsets the child and someone needs to be there, but there could be language in the form that states that the responsibility of the provider, if this child seems agitated, would be to contact the school if they weren't able to contact the parent, or something about the parents being, But I just, we just raised our hand not that long ago for a telehealth contract, and we're going to be doing more and more of that. And I can't possibly imagine that the expectation is that our students would be on having a telehealth session with another staff member sitting in the room with them. That just doesn't seem, I don't want to say unethical, but aren't there like privacy laws for health issues, which would include mental health?
Well, I would have our legal representative speak to the law, but I just for clarity, with the contracts that we've had, like with our external providers, specifically with JESA, just as an example, right? So because the previous to the pandemic, those services in those 11 to 19 schools were provided in a face-to-face setting, and since we've come forward with the new RFP, which is in the process of being completed, and the MOUs being drawn out for that, for implementation, it does have language in there, clearly, because we want to ensure that we have the capacity for telehealth services for any new providers. But that is not the primary means by which our students will receive services through JESA and the other providers. In total, it will be, I think, 59 schools, I believe, or it could be 69 schools or 68 schools. So I just want to be clear that we are not subcontracting out for primarily telehealth services. And in terms of the supervision, again, speaking from a building leader lens, while one may not be in the room, right, with the student while they are getting those services, in the example that I gave you previously, where we knew who was physically coming into our building, and that person's identification matched up with the form that we had, and they are screened through the machines that we have in every single one of our main offices, we knew who was with that student. And so in the cases that I'm speaking of, we don't know, like if the student is going into a room to be on a computer or on their phone to receive that service, unless somebody can see exactly who is on the other end of that call, and if that person is in fact the person that is lined up, right, through the form, that is the level, I guess, of supervision. Whereas, just to give you kind of a scenario, right, so if we were to have if I'm the principal of a large high school, and we have a list of students that receive these services, and we have them on a spreadsheet, and our main office secretaries are aware, they've communicated that they've gotten that communication from their counseling office, and so they absolutely know who to expect, they know their name, they know they've been screened, right, and as they come in, we are aware of who is meeting with the student. It's still a layer of complexity. I'm just providing some context here and some of the challenges that would be a part of it.
I feel like they could follow the same processes, though, and it could have a notation that it's a private provider, and it's the parent's responsibility to. Again, as a parent of a child who actually participated in this, but used to just go off at lunch on their own and not tell anybody, why would we as a school system not want to have it? I would rather that a parent have to fill in a form that they submit to the school so the school's aware, for all of the reasons that you're stating, than them just sneak off and do it on their own.
I do want to point out that there's another layer of management. I'm trying to think back on all the comments that we received and everything that we hear from the counselors, social workers, psychologists in case managing, who sees who when, who sees what where, what rooms are provided, who's responsible for being that follow-up adult if something is needed. It does add another level of responsibility to those roles that are already taxed. Additionally, it's different working with a company that we have an MOU with, that we can troubleshoot as a system and problem solve any of those concerns that might come up. As a group, there's a responsible party, there's a contract, there's an agreement, versus we don't know how many independent practitioners we will get or face within the scope of a school. So it's kind of like an umbrella opening up, right? It increases all those different points of context, all those different levels of variability, and that's challenging for a principal. I've sat in that same seat as Damon has, and I'm thinking to myself, how would I be able to manage this? And in some spaces, certainly I can see it, but I always remember Sally telling us that when policy is written, it's written broadly. And so I can't just picture it at Sligo Middle School. I have to picture what that looks like at Blair High School with over 3,000 students. So just a consideration.
I'm going to let Ms. Wolf jump in, but I do just, in reference to what you just said, I do feel like we would rather our students not miss additional school for traveling. We don't have enough staffing available for counselors and school psychologists and everything else. And it just seems to me like we're excluding something that.
Listen, I support that we want our students to receive whatever services they need in order to be able to access the education we're trying to provide them. But I don't support that amendment at all. I think that there are a lot of liability issues attached to it. I think that you don't know how the student is going to feel after a session. And I think that our primary responsibility is educating the student, and our service provisions go to them being able to receive that. But I don't think that we should start trying to, and I'm sorry, yes, on your name, add to the layers that our administrators are already trying to deal with in a building daily. And I've got to say, the buildings that I've been in, where are they going to be? In a closet? Because there is no more room for privacy in most of these buildings. I just don't support it, though, mainly from a liability standpoint. I think that you have no idea who they're accessing on Zoom.
But you don't think it's even a bigger liability if the kids do it without the school knowing about it?
I think that it's the family's responsibility to ensure that the student is receiving, and they can let us know if the student needs to leave the school to go and access the service. Either the parent has made provisions for it, or they're getting it through a service that we are providing, not a service that they are accessing through Zoom and we have no concept of. I just see real liability issues with that, and I won't be supporting that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So this is
Jump
Ms.
in there.
Evans. Yeah, thank you. So I do appreciate you always thinking about our students, and we do want to ensure that they have access and can get the support that they need. Mr. Monteleone and Ms. Duranby really laid it out. In particular, when Ms. Duranby mentioned how some of the people that we are working with, we have a memorandum of understanding with them, and so everything is pretty much laid out. And so when you think, when you think about 1 or 2 or 3 children be able to access those services, you do think, yes, but we have 160,000 plus students in our public school system. And if you think about on any given day, you just take the pandemic, right? Our students are going through a lot. On any given day, at any point in time, it could be a good bit of the students in the school needing access to a space. So I just said the other day at the table, there are a lot of things that we are doing, and we don't have the capacity to be able to do that. I don't know if we find a partnership with someone for a parent to come and get their child to go somewhere, use a facility to be able to have access to this telehealth you're talking about. I just don't think we should do it in that way, in policy in particular. So I will not be able to support the amendment as well.
Okay. Mr. Irvin?
Yeah, I had another question, but I wanted to kind of offer my thoughts on this as well. So if you're saying, if policy is not the place, what would kind of be the alternative if this is something that the board would want to explore?
I mean, where to put this her amendment?
Instead of
as specific as to allowing every student to be able to have access to.
No, to ask and make arrangements with the school to have the potential. I mean, if you think that every student's going to do this, I'm not trying to be snarky, but
I'm not sure that
this
every
isn't.
student,
But
right now, what?
But at least that way, the school could say, well, you know what, you can't do it at this time because we don't have the capacity, but if you could schedule it at a different time, perhaps you could, or, something like that, if it's a matter of finding a space.
So let me provide a little more background.
So I know it gets done if it's in policy, right? So that's what the point you're trying to make. I do understand that. And so in saying not putting it in policy, I didn't mean that in particular, but I just meant in the way that Ms. Mandrowski is proposing.
Okay. Yeah, if I could
go ahead and still elaborate and say what you want to say. Absolutely.
No, I didn't mean that in any way like a rhetorical question. My thought process is kind of, so it's supporting students whatever it takes, right? And I think that, this is certainly an element to add to provide that balanced support to students. Of course it poses challenges. Of course it poses logistical challenges, and maybe in 100% of cases, students won't get serviced in this way. But I can imagine that there's a way it's possible. I think the distinction between, the in-person kind of method that we practice now versus this telehealth practice that we're discussing, maybe that's not as strong as a distinction as we're making it out to be. Maybe there's a way to have, service providers check in with administration virtually before seeing students. So my thought process is, even if it poses logistical challenges, there's certainly a way. And again, going back to that piece of supporting students, whatever it takes. That being said, those are all certainly considerations, and maybe considerations that would not, speaking to that piece of kind of broadly policy serving that broad purpose, maybe it's not physically the right place, which is why I was kind of asking the question, is there another way where we can kind of look more deeply into how to make this possible? Because macro level, yeah, I think it's certainly a service that we'd want to work closely to provide to students.
So with you wording it like that, so yeah, no, I do think there's a way we can probably talk about it, right?
Right.
Well, what my proposal was to not have the specifics in the policy, but to have in the policy that it would be in the regulations, is what I had proposed. Just to answer your question about where else would it. So it wouldn't specify all of the specifics, but perhaps we do need to talk about clarifying what in-person counseling looks like versus tele-counseling.
Then I would ask you, are you referring to K through 12?
Sure.
And so you would have, I could just imagine my 8-year-old grandson going somewhere to speak to somebody on Zoom.
I couldn't imagine as a parent having that be a thing.
But it would be possible under what you're saying.
Well, we could say middle and high school.
I'm just saying there are liability issues. I hear you, Arvin, and I think that we are offering things under telehealth.
Absolutely.
And I think that as we get that rolling, maybe we can look at adding even more providers under telehealth, if possible. We do know they're struggling also to find people to work. So it's not that there aren't ways that we could think of doing it. I just can't conceive of it the way Ms. Mandrowski presented it. Okay? But I have a question, if I may.
Absolutely.
My question goes to line 37, in there where you start talking about the sort of umbrella positions that we have that are supporting mental health. I was wondering, and I know that this hasn't been finalized because it's a proposal in the superintendent's budget, which has not been adopted yet by the board, but would this include wellness trainers? And are they direct outreach professionals, quote unquote? I'm just looking at the list of positions that are listed between 37 and, like, say, 42. And you know the current proposal includes wellness trainers. I just want to know, would they fall under this policy?
So I want to clarify for everyone, just to have a common understanding of wellness trainers. Wellness trainers are a new initiative this school year through the Community Schools Initiatives, partially funded by the MD Leads grant. So they're not they're a position that is temporarily funded and only for specific schools. So right now, just the 26 community schools, there are 16 wellness trainers. They are under our umbrella of our SEIU union, and so they're not, their roles as professionals in and around wellness are not exactly the same as those who are psychologists, counselors, licensed social workers, et cetera. So I cannot speak to what gets written in the policy. My guess would be probably not, but I'm certain that Ms. Williams will tell you it's something that we could look at and get back to you.
I'm just curious about it because you talked about it being an umbrella kind of policy covering, I thought, everybody that's in that realm of providing those kinds of services.
Makes sense.
Would this include them? And you don't have to answer now. You may not know the answer. That's fine.
They may come under, other trusted adults. We did word it at 39 as such as. So we could more tightly limit who we're including in this section of policy as including but not limited to. But I think we did mean this 6. I will refer back to my colleagues on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Kim?
Yes. So the one point I wanted to raise, so looking under the first kind of position listed, starting line 37, kind of listing those different student mental health team members who serve students in the buildings, and then taking those reflections to under implementation strategies, number 2, providing students and families with school level and topic specific information needed to effectively access each social, emotional, and mental health programming. So the point that I just wanted to make sure I raised is, I think a big part of that providing information to students and families is knowing who to go to for kind of what concerns, specifically between counselors, psychologists, and social workers. Obviously, a lot of intersection there, but I think among those important and necessary kind of pieces of information for students is knowing who they can go to with what. So to me, it looks like that's been captured in that second implementation strategy, but I just wanted to raise that as an important consideration.
I have that in my notes as well, and whether or not there should be something about schools introducing their staff to all students at some point. Okay, does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, well then we can vote to move it on to the full board for tentative action. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, well, unless everybody or anybody has anything else, I do believe that brings us to a close, but I'm going to hold on a minute and make sure, because...
Are you moving that is your vote to move it as amended? Or
They didn't accept the amendment.
Okay.
I mean, unless there were other amendments that were made that I'm forgetting about because got my mind thinking about this, but were there any other changes that we made? I don't think so.
So as is? Okay.
Yep, as is. I'll be definitely bringing it back up at the full board, and maybe Mr. Kim and I can work on some language or thoughts that could work. So, all right, well then, if that's everything, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.